All
Okay,
right.
then can everyone see my screen with the meeting slides?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks everyone.
Okay, with that, I'd like to call this meeting of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Advisory Board to order. Just always as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. Please mute yourself or you are not speaking. If you'd like to ask a question or give comment, please use the raise hands function. We ask that you turn on your camera so that your name appears when you speak. Please feel to cover the camera on your device if you don't want to appear on the screen. And as always, if you have not turned in your conflict of interest forms, then you're not permitted to vote. Can we take the roll?
Okay, I can go ahead and do that, Councilman. Is there a representative from District 6 present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Hill CDC present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Hill District Federal Credit Union present? Is a representative from the Hill District Consensus Group present?
Present.
Is a representative from Wesley Center AME Zion Church present? Is a representative from Shenley Heights Community Development Program present? Is a representative from the Historic Hill Institute present?
Present.
Is a representative from Ujamaa Collective present?
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you. Is a representative from the Office of State Representative Arion Abney present? Is a representative from the Office of County Executive Sarah Enamorado present? Is a representative from the Office of the Mayor present? Is a representative from the Pittsburgh Public School District present? And is a representative from Allegheny County Council present? I did see someone just joined.
Reverend Grayson.
Thank you very much, Reverend Grayson. So the representative from Wesley Center AME Zion Church is present. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. So that takes us to old business, beginning with the LERTA update, and I believe Alex was providing that.
Thanks, Councilman. Yep, so just to give a brief update, the current account balance as of September 16th is $7,327,000 or $842.57. The projected future revenues are same as previously reported. The Block E2 owner payment will be incoming at some point. And then the current other revenues or the pending revenues will be the share of parking revenues for the Melody tent lots. And then once the venue is constructed, that's $2 per ticket. Hold on, Marimba, let me get back to my... yeah, Marimba, go ahead. I see your hands raised.
Thank you, Alex. Can you refresh my memory? I believe at the last meeting, we asked for a report regarding fees from the URA. Perhaps that came through and I overlooked it. I don't remember seeing that, but I know that that was a question that we had asked you all to provide that report and the hours of URA employees. That's a pretty important item.
Yeah, actually, I can forward that to the. I have that from our team. We can send that along via email. It's yeah, it has each of the hours broken down. It would the invoice that we sent to Zion's be acceptable? That has a breakdown of the hours plus plus the administrative fee for each of the last 4 years.
Yes, that would be helpful. And
Okay.
then I think last meeting we also talked about an approval process because technically the bank is just holding the fees, but the advisory committee needs to approve that invoice just to make sure that we're all on the same page as the body responsible for managing the funds, so to speak. So can you I don't know if you all have had an opportunity to discuss that internally or not yet.
So the URA leadership is not inclined to have an approval process, but we are willing to do it. It's kind of a notice before we draw that fee.
Mm-hmm. Well, then we should probably have URA leadership come and talk to us about that because obviously there'd be no way to manage conflicts or, questions that we would have relative to your fees. So while I appreciate that the funds are at the URA, again, these funds were not derived by the URA. They are being held at the URA. So I just want to emphasize that it is important to have an approval process. So perhaps the leadership of the URA can join us at the next meeting if necessary or we can talk about it offline between meetings. I'm happy to do that also. Thank you.
You can let them know. Yeah, sorry, our leadership is all on either on conferences or on PTO this week. So
Hi, I'm sorry. This is Britt. I'm in my car, so I couldn't find where to raise my hand. Did you disclose what the amount was that was invoiced? I know that you're going to send it by email, but I just wanted to know if we could have a verbal.
yes, yeah. So we invoiced for the first time, I believe back in June, and it was for $285,285, and that covers the administrative fee for going back to 2021. And kind of per the policies and procedures, URA staff takes an admin fee based on actual staff time worked. So that's how we calculated that. So the invoice includes each hour, the total amount of hours of URA staff time per year for 2021, 2022, 2023, and 24. And then the fee that was calculated based on those hours each of those years.
So that's roughly $95,000 a year.
I believe closer to 70 because it's covering 4 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, sorry if I asked this before, but just, trying to make sure I understand. The administrative fee covers what? So like, you're billing for staff time. Does that mean going forward, because Kirk is in place, there won't be any administrative fee applied by the URA, or what is it?
So there's still URA staff working on the reinvestment fund and in terms of legal, project management, communications, working on it, leadership's involvement. So there is still a staff time in addition to Kirk being on board, but URA staff aren't developing programs, doing community outreach, or really doing the bulk of the legwork right now. So that
will you guys present like a projected amount of staff hours that you're feeling would be allocated? To Marimba's point, so that there could be a potential review process to understand in advance.
I think we can kind of bring that back to leadership to see if that's something they'd want to do. But I mean, we're happy to provide kind of a overall number of hours worked so far.
Well, not even just the work so far, but just going forward. Now that we have Kirk and we know that, whatever his costs will be, is going to be applied to the fund. I do think we should be thinking about how do we manage the costs that are being, incurred by by us and being paid to the URA. So we should have in advance an idea of what you're projecting your potential fees and costs would be. Obviously, we could always do what's budgeted to actual, but I do think that there should be an approval process or something set forth where we're not waiting for the aftermath and being told what's applied, but agreeing that yes, this should be allocated to this fund and we do it for those hours.
Okay, we can bring that back to URA leadership for them to make a decision. And kind of note the advisory board's concerns here. Yeah, as a general summary, believe that it's right now it'll be hard for us to make a projection into next year, given how inconsistent staff hours were the past 4 years. Because in 2023, there were about $1,000 or 1,000 hours in staff time worked versus about 500 last year in 2024. And then around 250 in 2022. So So we could potentially give an average, but
And maybe we could just revisit it. I don't know if that's what we discuss right now, unless the group at large wants to. But I think, given Kirk's position and role, and being strategic about managing what we have left in this fund, we should really get a plan together, and it should be a little bit more concrete as to what we're going to approve as far as staff hours for URA.
Okay, understood.
You can think of it kind of like a work plan, Alex, to provide to the committee so that we are all, otherwise we are really not able to budget and provide, guidance to the URA as to how we think we need the fund to be staffed and what support we think we need. So, for example, I know at the last meeting we said, hey, we probably don't need 4 employees from the URA on the calls at this point. So that would have been, you're here this week. I think that's great. But last month we paid for an hour and a half of senior level employees, right? As well as another, kind of mid-level employee. And so I think those are the kinds of things that we need to be mindful of, because those funds are desperately needed in the community. So let's just work together and figure out a methodology that works for the advisory committee as well as the URA moving forward. So perhaps a meeting offline would be appropriate in order to bring some structure to this. Thank you.
Understood. Yeah.
I have a quick question, which may be a different issue. The interest from the fund, which reflects, where is those funds reflected? And I might be at a place, but just want to get a sense of those dollars in terms of the increase of dollars to the fund to offset some of your costs. Can someone respond to that?
Yeah. I asked our CFO to kind of pull a report, a few days ago, and on average, it's between like $25,000 and $30,000 in interest each month, and so that's reflected in the overall account balance.
Okay.
Would you all be kind of interested in seeing that interest reflected in these LRTA reports each month, just
Absolutely.
for the previous month balance?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
That helps understand, even though we're paying you out, we at least offer the interest can balance out the dollars and get a sense. I had no clue that what the amount was monthly. That sounds pretty good, but that's good to know.
Of course, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, maybe even a P&L or financial report, and with a P&L of sorts would be really helpful, or balance sheet. I don't know if the interest would be reflected on the P&L. Whatever the case may be, financial report would be important. Something a bit more formal than just the slide presentation would be excellent. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'll see what we can pull. I'm not sure what our financial database looks like, so. You can see what we can do, and then we'll include the interest, the monthly interest in this report as well. All right, does anyone have any other questions about this page before we move on?
Dr. Ellis, your hand is raised. I'm not sure if it's for this or not.
Yeah, I mean, because we were having the conversation, I did want to address my concerns relative to like the advisory board and Kirk's position and like this whole monetary piece. But if it's not fit for this particular LRTA conversation, I can hold off. It's not complicated. It's not complicated or long either. I just wanted to say it.
Why don't you say it now so we can then move on?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, a part of my concern is that Kirk would have some undue pressure to sort of be like the only decision maker. And I guess I just wanted to remind the URA that as the advisory board, it's literally our job to help to advise Kirk and to work with him, and that he has us as well. I'm hoping that it wasn't communicated to him that he has to, I mean, I understand his position, but that he sort of has to get like approval of the URA staff members, because we are the advisory board. And also just to remind the advisory board that now that we have somebody, let's actually support him and like attend the meetings and things like that, so that we can help him shape what the position will end up looking like, and so that we can all be successful here. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. If no other questions regarding the LERTA, let's move on to a formal presentation of guidelines to the URA.
Thank you, Councilman. So Alex, we can go to this first slide. So as you guys know, we had a really big step forward in our August Community Advisory Board meeting where this Community Advisory Board unanimously approved the 3 guidelines that were formally presented and worked through in committee. And those guidelines were related to children, youth, and education, workforce development, and development program initiatives. This past Thursday, we were able to attend the URA board meeting where we formally introduced those guidelines to the board. What we learned in between our advisory board meeting as a community and the URA meeting that happened last Thursday is that there is a 30-day public comment period that is included with any guidelines that are introduced from the URA. And if you have specific legal questions regarding that, I'm sure Alex is happy to answer those. But because of that 30-day feedback period, the formal approval of those guidelines and related monies will occur at the next URA board meeting, which is, I believe, October 9th, if I'm not mistaken. For the 30-day feedback period, there is a comment section that is now embedded on the URA Lower Hill LERTA page, as well as the URA Lower Hill page. And there are links to both of those there. I also will send the links out to the advisory board at the conclusion of this meeting. From my understanding, typically there isn't a lot of community input when the 30-day guideline period is open. And thus far, we have not received any comments on the guidelines, but I do anticipate getting some comments because I think it's beneficial to get this information out. And comments can be in support of, right? And so I think it would be great to, as advisory board members and others in the community who are excited about this critical step forward in releasing of funds to make some comments related to such. And I think we'll also get some feedback that we may want to look at and explore and maybe potentially, make some revisions so that we can ensure that there is approval coming in October. I think the formal introduction went over well. Julia was able to present a snapshot of what those 3 programs look like. I was able to get up and just say a few words about, the work of this board and being able to shape those guidelines, the input from dozens and dozens of folks that I've been able to engage with. And, we're feeling good about the community reception. Councilman Lavelle, is there anything else that you would want to add related to our presentation last Thursday?
No, not really. Only that the board was extremely happy that we were finally at this place.
Agreed. Again, the next board meeting, I believe, is October 9th. I just think it'll be a really great milestone amongst many that we'll have, but I think it'll be great. And if anyone wants to be there that day, I definitely would welcome your presence as well. Okay, Alex, I think we can go to the next page. So we've been working to get a couple more guidelines across the finish line. As you guys know, we have presented an idea draft of some MWBE guidelines that are intended to support small businesses. We've been moving into a direction of having those be a combination of grants and low interest loans. And we're still looking to bring another committee conversation together. I would really like to involve as many members as possible from this board, but especially those that have some small business expertise and a passion around supporting small businesses in the Hill. So I guess that's the second bullet point there. Still working to pull that group together. Again, I would love for anyone who's interested and being a part of those discussions to let me know either by chat, by email, text, what have you. But I would love to get those meetings scheduled either next week or the week after, and wouldn't want to go any further because again, I think we have some good momentum there. We just need to get together to carry us across the finish line. And again, thanks in advance for all the time and expertise you guys put into this work. It's beautiful to be a part of this team. With the housing committee, which is something we talked about at our advisory board last week, I was able to meet with Kim, who definitely is a champion of some of that work, and we will host a housing committee meeting next Tuesday. And so I'll send that invite out to the entire board, but we would love to have anyone that's able and open to be a part of that discussion. I think what we are looking at is, one, are there some line items in the allocation plan that has already been agreed to by the board that may be able to be moved around to support another cycle of housing stabilization that ideally would look a little different than before. Maybe the amounts maybe aren't up to 20. Maybe it's something smaller, something we're exploring. Maybe the language is more geared towards critical repairs, roofs, windows, things of that nature. But the interest and demand in the community is significant, and so I would love to continue these conversations as a group together. This is a very ambitious plan, but ambition has got us some success. So I want to try to keep with it. If we're able to get the MBE group together, if we're able to have a couple meetings of housing, it would be possible that we could present some revised and new guidelines, new related to housing for an October advisory board meeting. I think that would give us roughly 5 funding opportunities in the community, and that would be great to try to get out. So that's an ambitious goal, but it's a goal that maybe we could work to. And again, thanks in advance for everyone who has participated thus far and will participate in the future. Are there any outstanding questions regarding committees? Okay. Advisory board meetings, this is just a reminder that we have 3 remaining through the end of 2025. Thursday, October 22nd at 3:30, Thursday, November 12th at 3:30, and then Thursday, December 16th at 3:30. Again, these will be from 3:30 to 5, an hour later than we started today. But as we move towards some consistency, I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that these were the meetings coming up. And I think, Alex, we're able to move into some new business. So what I wanted to talk about today, I think we only have one, I believe, voting item, but there is some very important information that I would love to just talk through as an advisory board. And so as we're inching close to a big moment in getting our guidelines approved in October and our funds released, we have to continue to think about what the application is going to look like. And I know that this advisory board did a great job working on some of this through committee a few years back. And some of those ideas are reflected in what I'm presenting to you today. And I think it's a good way to ideally launch our programs. The goal would be to start working on this application immediately so that when we get the guidelines approved in October, we could open applications literally the following day. And I think that's going to keep us on track. And so what I have here is an opening portal page. Again, I think this is something the committee and advisory board talked about over the last few years, where someone would be able to come to a opening portal page, which describes what the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund is. This is like a welcome page, has some key things that applicants must be able to read before continuing. So applicants must be based in, serve, or directly benefit residents of the Greater Hill. Funding decisions will be based on readiness, alignment with community priorities, and demonstrated impact. Each applicant may only apply under one initiative area per application. So it doesn't mean they can apply for multiple initiatives, but there will be a singular application for each. and there is going to be required documentation depending on which initiative they're applying for, which may include budgets, work plans, proof of eligibility, etc. So after that uniform opening welcome page, we would go to the next page and the next slide, which then they would select their initiative area. So right now we know 3 of these initiatives have been approved by this board. So the first initial collective page right here for the portal will have development program initiatives. I have to make a revision there. Workforce development, children, youth education. As we get other approvals, and this would also include the MWBE support, it would include the housing support, but there would be a page where all those options would be made available. At that point, an applicant would select one of those options, and this is what they would see. And this is good, Alex, you are correct. This would be specific to each initiative, but kind of common across all 3, that we would collect information. So with the development program initiatives, we want to know whether it's a 501c3, whether it's for profit. We would need some of those identifiers up front. We would ask questions about whether or not the work is based in the Greater Hill, whether or not this is a MWBE, et cetera. And I think this is pretty standard. After that point, they would then be prompted to provide some additional information. I don't have word counts uniformly through all these slides. I can provide you guys with the whole application after this meeting. But what I wanted to do was both create a professional and formal application process, but also not have applicants be kind of over inundated with, having to write essays to some of these pieces of the application. So a basic project overview title, location type, is this mixed use, is this commercial, et cetera. A project description, 500 words is, it's not a lot, but I think it gives enough leeway for someone to really be able to speak to their project. A concise summary summarizing scope, goals, alignment with the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund. The funding request, so how much is already committed. Again, the development program initiative is intended to be last in funding, so we want to be over-communicate about the need to know where these projects are financially. There will need to be some readiness documentation, so whether or not there's site control, permits and zoning approval, capital commitments, funding agreements. Then there's eligibility activities, so how will these funds be used? There's some compliance and commitments. Again, Alex can speak to this if there are more questions, but because these funds are being administered through the URA, there are some prevailing wage requirements. There is going to be a need to put forth an MWBE plan. There will need to be levels of insurance, and everyone through all 3 initiatives will have to agree to some grant reporting. Again, that's going to help with our storytelling. That's going to help speak to the successes we have. And so we want that to be understood up front. We are going to talk about the community benefit and alignment. There was a small change here in preparing to present this with you guys, where initially we used language about how this project aligns with the Greater Hill District Master Plan, but I believe that hasn't been formally approved by the city. And Alex, maybe you could speak to that if there's some more questions. So we would change that language and put the master plan in as appropriate, but we changed it to the community collaboration and implementation plan. The real key here is to make sure that projects are being scored, being asked to really think about how their project aligns with stated goals in the community and what is the community benefit. And then there's going to be a checklist attachment. Again, just over communicating the need to provide a budget, to demonstrate site control, to demonstrate levels of commitment, and organizational documents as needed. Any strong comments? Yes.
I'd like to jump in for a second on the master plan topic in particular. So the Greater Hill District Master Plan is still in effect, but the revised Greater Hill District Master Plan has not been formally adopted. So I just want to make sure that we're not, erasing, right, our established master plan for the community. So that should absolutely go under community benefits. The CSIP can also go there, but they have different, there's some different metrics, particularly around housing. For those plans. So we don't want to cause any confusion. Specifically, the affordable housing component of the CSIP is lower than the Greater Hill District Master Plan, which is unfortunate, but it is. So just be mindful of that, and I think I'm also mindful that these funds are derived from a Lower Hill action. So I think we want to, just make sure we, have some balance there and put Greater Hill District Master Plan as well as CSIP. And then the other thing I think I want to call out here is in terms of readiness documents. I would like to give that a little thought in terms of the site control, permit, and zoning approvals. I mean, there may be some, those are examples, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because there may not always be some of those documents, right? I mean, what we're testing for is readiness, and sometimes that will indicate readiness, but it may not apply across the board for development related projects. So I just want to make sure that we have some flexibility there. And then the prevailing wage, isn't that a URA requirement? Is that also required on the is that also required on these particular funds legally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So remember, prevailing wage is a state level requirement that so it applies whenever funds are flowing through a public entity. And so since the URA is the trustee for these funds, these are public funds. And so they do trigger prevailing wage when those funds are used on construction, rehabilitation projects and demolition projects.
So let me just get my head around this. So would the funds trigger prevailing wage if they were not held at the URA?
Yes, but we're legally required to keep them at the URA. Because they sort of, these funds are established as, like the three taxing bodies established this fund and were intent on keeping these funds like public and held with a public body. So if they were redirected to, say, paying these funds to like a private entity, then possibly not. That would be a whole suite of legal analysis. But in the position we're at, where the URA is the trustee of these funds, the prevailing wage requirements are going to be triggered.
Okay, I think we really need to dig in on this one a bit, because the funds are only up to $250,000, and we want to have impact. And we want to make sure that, people are making a livable wage, obviously. However, prevailing wage may not, for example, if someone is coming to repair, I don't know, let's just say a community room, right? Where you need drywall, paint, and flooring. That could easily double, as it will in many cases, the cost, which means that the funds from the community don't go as far. So I think finding balance around, and I understand what you're saying, if it's coming from the URA, it obviously has to be. I think we need a legal opinion, Alex, and I request that you seek a legal opinion as to whether or not these funds, the original sources of the funds, absolutely require a prevailing wage. Because if they don't, perhaps we need to explore at the committee's pleasure, putting these funds somewhere where that wage is not triggered. Again, if we're trying to make this money have impact in our community, we are without question talking about a considerable amount of increase for a very, very relatively small amount of capital when we have extensive community need. And we know people from within our community who work on these kinds of projects all the time, right? And it's not that they're not getting paid well. In many cases they are, but they may not be getting paid prevailing wage. Otherwise the projects probably wouldn't be getting done, candidly. So I think we want to think about how to navigate that. Alex, are you able to secure a legal opinion and some precedent on LRTA funds if they always trigger prevailing wage?
I've written a legal memo on prevailing wages applicability to the reinvestment fund probably about 2 years ago. I can look at that, potentially update it, and we
I
can
like
share
to-
it with the board. That's not a problem. But generally, so I want to be clear that if we're using this money to fund any project that is kind of over $25,000, and that these funds are going towards construction, or alteration, repair, demolition, that's going to trigger prevailing wage under the state statute. And so ways that we can structure this are sometimes, if we're only paying soft costs with reinvestment fund money, that is a way to not have prevailing wage triggered. Because prevailing wage sort of applies, like if the construction aspect is funded with public funds, then that construction work triggers prevailing wage across that whole project. But if you're using it, say, for acquisition and using private financing for the like the acquisition, or for soft costs like architecture fees, then it's not necessarily going to be triggered. That said, since we've sort of envisioned this program as last in grant funding, we sort of imagined a lot of times, there is going to be prevailing wage requirements from some other state source. If it's an RCAP, that's always going to have prevailing wage requirements. If there's federal HUD funding, that's going to trigger Davis-Bacon wages, which will preempt prevailing wage. But yeah, so sorry, that's my spiel on prevailing wage.
Can I comment?
Thank you.
I kind of concur with Marimba in terms of prevailing wage. It could be a deal breaker for small projects, like, let's say a repair on a roof. Let's say $10,000 prevailing wage. If you have to get an entity through that, it might be 12, 15,000, or at least 13,000 versus we just got enough for the 10. And so if there are ways to work around that in many cases, and you mentioned some ways, and I understand prevailing wage. I mean, it does shoot up a cost of definitely more livable wage, but prevailing wage can be a deal breaker on a lot of projects that might be small projects that could get accomplished in the Hill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, if it does become a deal breaker for some of these projects, I mean, we're happy to look at sources and uses, determine where our funds can be mobilized to avoid triggering prevailing wage. If for small projects, so prevailing wage is only going to apply when the project exceeds $25,000, which is that's right now not a lot for construction, but those kind of smaller construction projects are exempt from prevailing wage, and we do find that we can often funnel our funds into to non-construction costs if if funding the construction costs with public dollars is going to kill the budget, so to speak.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If you could follow back up with us on that would be excellent. Thank you, Alex.
Sorry, Marimba. I saw a question in the chat from Kim, just asking for just a definition around prevailing wage. Alex, if you're able to provide that really quickly. And then Councilman Lavelle, I believe you were attempting to say something a while ago, so I just want to give you that space as well.
Oh, yeah. I can respond to that. So, Dr. Ellis, so prevailing wage is essentially minimum wage rates for construction trades for projects that are funded with public dollars. So it's just a set of minimum wages for construction workers, based on like their labor classification and the project type.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I understand the concept of prevailing wage. I was literally asking for the amount.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, so the amount when it's triggered?
No, like, so for example, Alex, really quickly. So for example, a carpenter, you mean per hour for a carpenter or a bricklayer or electrician or something like that? Kim, is that what you're asking?
Oh, I think, okay, wait. So I thought, is this that an applicant has to make a certain wage or an applicant has to spend a certain wage on a laborer?
They would have to spend a certain wage on a laborer.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. And I take it that is that supposed to be union labor most of the time?
It can be. The unions have kind of made their wages consistent with the current prevailing wages per like labor classification. So oftentimes, if there's union labor, it'll meet prevailing wage requirements. Yep, that's right, Marimba.
Okay. All right. All right.
So
Thank
you
you.
might go from, say, $35 per hour wage or something like that to a $55 per hour wage for depending on a trade, right? And that could mean a lot less work in many cases, for the actual project. So again, I just think it's something we have to balance. And then also if we're talking about NBE, yeah, I mean, there's some layers here that should be seriously considered if we want to see impact for our project, because I could see people just saying no thanks. You know what I mean? Because they're feeling like, I don't want to overpay for a roof, by this much. And that may be how they see it, because they know that they may even have bids that they are submitting that are $10,000, but it may be below prevailing wage. So then we're going to double their cost, you know what I mean, and give them more than they need because of this standard. I just think we need to give some thought to it. I'll leave it there.
That was my point. Yeah.
Right.
Councilman Lavelle, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, Alex touched on what I was going to add.
Okay. And I just wanted to restate from the chat, it is, just for clarification, again, it's for projects that are over 25,000. But I think the point is clearly taken, and we have some follow-up to have with this board. And Alex, we can talk offline, but once you bring some of this information together, it might be worth having a meeting with members of the board who want to be involved prior to our next advisory board meeting.
That sounds good. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk about prevailing wage. So.
All right, so Alex, we can go to the next slide. And guys, I'm gonna try to move through some of this a little quicker, knowing that there's not a lot of time left on our agenda, and trying to be respectful of everyone's time. So for children, youth, and education, this is a page where, again, it's gathering information. It's slightly different than the development program initiatives, obviously, because this is going to be more geared towards 501c3s, nonprofits serving youth in the community. There is an added bullet point that if someone is a child care provider, right away, we want to know what their accreditation is, and to get that information. We can go to the next slide, Alex. And I think the children.
What do you mean by accreditation, for clarity? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So whether or not there's some licensing or certificates you may get for your facility. For instance, if you're operating programs with youth, I think for some daycare providers, there is a formal recognition of the registration with the Commonwealth, that there's a STAR system. I can spell that out more,
Okay.
Rev Grayson, but I think the point here was to make sure that these were licensed and recognized programs, opposed to someone who, may be babysitting out of their home but doesn't have those levels of formal recognition. Does that make sense?
A little bit, but not totally. But I don't want to prolong it. Just get more clarity later.
Okay. Well, I can follow up with you, Rev, but if there's anything I'll follow up with you directly.
All right.
Here again, guys, is just standard, just a project overview, a project description. Pardon me for not including the word count here, but I think everything is 300 to 500 for certain descriptions. Again, just not trying to overburden an applicant, but also providing a level of formality and professionalism. So project description, what the funding request is. For anything with children, youth, and education, we want to tap into outcomes, right away. So what are the outcomes from the program? The budget and narrative. So attaching a budget, a narrative for how these monies will be used. Organizational capacity was just something, again, looking at best practices from some of the research I did that I included. You guys can let me know if how you feel about that, but it would speak to the history of the organization applying, key staffing that may be involved with the specific initiative. There is an insurance compliance. Sorry for the misspell there. Alex, if there's any questions, can you speak to that? And then wanting to know the 501c3 status or fiscal sponsorship. So someone could have a fiscal sponsor, which is, again, is common practice, a certificate of insurance, a timeline for the program, and any letters of support that would help the project. Marimba put in the chat that it's worth stating. Okay, Marimba, was this related directly to the Children's Youth and Education, or is this
No, that's for the committee to reflect on relative to the development initiatives. You can proceed, Kirk.
Okay, I'm sorry, Marimba, I just saw it pop up. But I think this is pretty standard, guys. Again, Rev, I'll follow up with you about childcare and really try to drill down there and answer any questions you have. Are there any like pressing questions here, suggestions about this portion of the application? So if not, we'll just move on to workforce development. Again, some of this is going to be similar to children's, youth, and education, 501c3 status, what the organization is, and trying to get contact information. We can go to the next slide. Again, they'll be asked to provide an overview, a summary of their project objectives and goals, the activities that will be provided, any partnerships relevant to this project. Again, very similar to the children's, youth, and education. Community impact is going to be requested. I have here as an example is population served. So whether you're doing a workforce development program, which may engage, older workers, workers who are being, reskilled, whether it's younger workers, just being able to spell that out. A budgeted narrative, again, about how funds will be used, and any 501c3 status or fiscal sponsorship. So this one is kind of closely aligned to the CYE, Children, Youth, and Education. Again, any strong comments or thoughts here?
Kirk, the thing I think we need to talk about just a little bit is some people who are going to want to pursue money within the community will need a fiscal sponsor. And in those cases, I want to make sure that fiscal sponsors aren't excluded from applying for funds themselves if they are being a fiscal sponsor for something else. You understand what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it
Okay.
does.
I just want to make sure that people don't get penalized for trying to help organizations or people who are working in the community that don't have 501c3 status.
Okay, noted.
Thank you.
So I have a different question, which goes back earlier. I apologize. In terms of like matching funds to this grant, this opportunity, let's say the Historic Landmark Society for churches will do a $10,000 matching fund, and a church needs pointing at 20,000, but they don't have the 10. Could they apply through us for the 10,000 for the matching as the match, as an example? Or would they have, or can could they have 10? Let's say the project needs 30. They do have 10. They ask for 10, and then they get this 10, ideally, if approved from the Historic Landmark Foundation. It's kind of just a question.
Yes. So my initial reaction, Rev, is I would say yes. I think it would be smart to clearly outline, how the total package of funding is going to support something that has a community benefit, or if it's for children, youth, and education, is going to serve youth, if it's a development project, et cetera. But I think that would just need to be clearly outlined. But I think I understand what you're getting at, and I would say that would be a potential grant that could be awarded. I don't know, Alex, are there any thoughts you have from a URA like legal standpoint?
To make sure I understand, so Rev, do you mean like we almost do like a conditional award where it says, we're committing this much, and then once you get this historic landmarks foundation funding, then we can use the reinvestment fund money as a match?
That's more of a question. Like, I know they have a short window, I think, let's say from now to December, of open applications for the preservation of historic churches. And let's say a church really to save that church needs some $30,000 worth, $20,000 worth of pointing, and so they will put up 10, but they need the other 10. Could a church or a nonprofit, a church apply who don't have the 10 or might need that another 10 apply for funds that way? It's kind of like what other, not only that as an example, but any other matching opportunities for any of the grants, because some require some matches.
Yeah, I don't see anything like prohibitive about that.
Okay.
As long as it's like these funds are fairly flexible in terms of what they're used on.
Yeah.
And if, it's still an eligible use under what's being approved here, it can absolutely serve as a match.
And then I
Yeah,
think
I don't see an issue with it.
sorry, Alex, there is a line item, Rev, related to the historical institution preservation as one of the 13 that is outlined as potential uses of the funds.
Okay.
Although there hasn't been specific guidelines drafted in direct alignment with that verbiage, I think there can be. So I think there could be more of a concrete long-term solution. But I think to Alex's point, with the guidelines that are currently approved, if there is a way to look at that language and somehow fit it within the structure, then I think we would be open to that. But I think your is more, maybe we need to start looking at those guidelines sooner, so we could have something specifically related to historic institutional preservation. It's there for a reason.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Sorry,
good.
just one more note. We have some discretion to waive guidelines too, with our board's approval. So that's always an option. If there's a use that the advisory board wants to fund and it's reasonable and kind of within the aims of the reinvestment fund, then we can have some flexibility there.
Thank you, Alex. And so I think I just want to move us along a little bit. The next slide is just related to next steps related to our application. Again, really thinking positively here and confidently that we're going to get our 3 guidelines approved in October. We want to have everything in place so that following Friday, we would have applications open. One thing that's going to be very critical to do that is to actually be able to build the applications proactively in the time between today's meeting and that meeting in October. There will be a learning curve because that work is going to have to fall on my shoulders, but I have done significant research kind of looking into it, and I'm confident I'll be able to grasp what is needed to start to build the application. So the URA has 2 systems that they use for various applications. JotForm is the one that's being recommended here. It's the same software that was used for the housing stabilization program. Sorry, I don't have the other software that is used for some of the bidding and contracts. I don't have that name right in front of me, but I looked into both of them, and the appropriate one here would be JotForm. What we need from the board today, and this is the only voting item that I foresaw coming in today's meeting, is we need approval to get a yearly license for JotForm. Again, even for seasoned users of this software, to put together an application, make revisions, et cetera, it is going to take some hours of admin time. And the admin time that the comms team at the URA would put into it would definitely eclipse pretty quickly the cost for a year license. A year license is $948. Speaking with Alex, what we would like to recommend is an allocation of $2,000. So that would be 2 years of a license, which does coincide with the current duration of my contract. And it would allow us to use these funds would come from the administrative line item. It would allow us to purchase the JotForm subscription and again, proactively start building not only for the guidelines that'll be approved now, but it'll give me a continual way to provide updates in real time. It'll allow us to present or provide a PDF of an application that is printable and easy to read, et cetera. So this is important. Actually kind of looking forward to starting to put some of this stuff together. So it's not something I have to rush to do in October. But I wanted to lay that out and see if there would be a potential motion to approve allocating $2,000 from the administrative line item to go ahead and get 2 years of a job form subscription.
All right, we can entertain a motion to approve.
I move that we go forward with the recommendation of Kirk for a 2-year lease on that program for this project.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Is anyone abstaining? Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, board. All right, so I have a couple more important items to discuss. Again, I'll send all this out via email so you guys can kind of comb through it. But if we can go to the next slide, I think it's important and also common practice. Alex, are you able to go to the next slide? Okay.
Sorry, my keys weren't working there for a second.
Alex, thank you for your support here. So I think, not only do we need a strong guidelines, not only do we need a thorough application process, but that one that doesn't burden, the applicants. I think it's important for transparency to really start to communicate how applications will be scored, how they're assessed, and how applications ultimately become awarded. And again, not only is this just a best practice and a common practice, but I think just from some of my discussions in the community, now that I've been meeting with more and more individuals with the housing stabilization program, there still seems to be some disconnect in terms of why certain applicants were not approved, what was the criteria, although it was communicated and there was a poverty level, those who had children in the home under a certain age, those who had seniors were given priority. But again, I think for transparency and trust, we kind of it would be great to over communicate those things. And so I'm trying to start that process now. And so just looking at children, youth, and education, and I know you all, I'm sure, would love to dig into this a little more. I did present this about a month ago at one of our committee meetings around the guidelines. I think they're pretty thorough, but I would like you guys to start thinking about how we score some of these applications. And so when we look at children, youth, and education, we want to have a scoring rubric with which we evaluate these programs based off their alignment with program objectives. So do they serve Hill District youth? Is there a focus on some of the focus points that we outlined, whether it's STEM, arts, athletics, cultural awareness, community education? Applications that show strong alignment would score higher in that area. Those with unclear connection to program goals or community goals would score lower. The impact and outcomes that are demonstrated through the application, strong measurable outcomes with clear evaluation methods would score highly. Outcomes that are vague or unmeasurable would score lower. And again, this doesn't mean that someone who is denied is never going to be able to seek and receive funds, but this would allow us to give tangible, clear feedback on how an application could be improved. Also, I think ensures that the things that we do fund and support are really strong and have an impact. So your program design and feasibility, we'll look at that. If they're well structured, project plan, a realistic timeline, et cetera, those will score higher. If the community and benefit and engagement is strong, if there's strong community benefit, if it engages youth and families, et cetera, those would score higher. The budget being realistic, well justified, aligning with eligible uses, those applications would score highly. And then making sure that there are the compliance pieces that are needed, whether it's related to insurance, et cetera. Those will be pieces that will score highly. Again, just trying to make sure that there's some fidelity, that there is a common tool that the community would know is being applied to other applications we receive. Now, they would change for depending on the initiative. So, Alex, we can go to the next slide. I think children, youth, and education and workforce development, there may be some similarity there. So, program design and activities is really going to be looked at with workforce development. Is the program design, is it well designed? Is it feasible? Is it an innovative program with clear objectives, et cetera? Those will score higher. Capacity and partnerships. So, does the organization have strong organizational capacity, relevant experience, credible partnerships? I imagine with workforce development, I think intentionally these guidelines were drafted in a way that there could be some partnerships with community-based organizations and workforce development leads that could really help bring some special programming together. And we'll look at, some of that stuff when we're evaluating these applications. And again, budget and sustainability. So is the budget clear, realistic? Is it tied to eligible activities? Is there a strong justification for the use of funds? Those would be highly scored applications. And again, if the budget is not in line with the uses of funds, if it's not realistic, those will be things that would score lower. When we get to the development program initiatives, that's the next slide, we'll see that this is going to be different because, of course, it's related to community development, right? So we want to be able to score for project readiness and feasibility. So as it's applicable, right? To Marimba's earlier point, maybe that's not applicable for every project, but when it is there full site control? Are permits in place? Is the development timeline realistic, right? We want to be able to see these dollars make a tangible impact and a somewhat immediate impact. And so we'll score based off that. Alignment with the community collaboration and implementation plan. You see, I have 2 asterisks there because it changed from Greater Hill District. Remember, we got your feedback. We'll put that language back in. So it'll be the CSIP and the Greater Hill District Master Plan. Is there strong alignment with identified priorities within that plan? Strong alignment scores higher. Weak or no clear alignment or not consideration of alignment, those will score lower. We want to look at community benefit and impact within all the initiatives. Does it create a benefit to the community? Does it create jobs, affordable housing, prevent displacement, et cetera? There's many different ways we could measure that, but we want to look at that in applications that clearly reflect the community benefit and impact. We want to score those higher. Minority women business enterprise, local hiring commitment as it's applicable. We want to be able to score on that. And again, just reinforcing the intent for this to be last in. Funding used to get projects over the finish line, where we could all celebrate and say, hey, these reinvestment dollars really helped get this project moving and realized. So we want to be able to measure sustainability, making sure that there are significant financial funding and leverage, et cetera. So I want to stop there. It's a lot. I will send these out, but I want to see if there's immediate comment.
One thing I'm thinking about relative to this part is I'm not sure that development should be last in. Because there's a finite amount of places where you can go to get this type of funding. And sometimes you may, I agree with Marimba about, choosing between site control and the permits. Like sometimes you have site control, but you don't have the permits, or you don't even have the funding that would allow you to get certain permits. Sometimes you just need the funding to get the site control. And quite frankly, that matters a lot in our community because we want people to have ownership in the community. So this particular section, I'm not sure that it should be sort of last in. I'll think about it, but those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Kim. So the guidelines we did agree to and vote to affirm as a board here was clearly outlined as last in funding. But I hear your concern. And so the initial guidelines that were presented related to MWBE support, even though the money's up to what was smaller, I think it was initially presented to the board as up to 25,000, but it was clearly and explicitly outlined in that initial draft of guidelines that those funds could be used for soft costs, could be used for site acquisition, also could potentially be used for working capital or operating expenses, which has been exciting to some of the people who have, talked to see where support is needed. So I think that was the way the intent was to address the need for soft costs, which, to your point, I've been told is often some of the hardest money to secure and raise, but that was intended to be folded into the MWBE support line item, which is not off the table. I think that still should be a component, absolutely, of potential uses, whether, we look more at loans, very low interest loans, or a combination of grants and loans. But that's where that was written into. But what has been laid before the URA board has been the development program initiative as discussed and presented to this board. And that has been approved, and that's what we'll be looking at in October.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I think this is why I think as a committee, we should we should also be reviewing these things because last in could mean, hey, I went and I talked to this organization and they told me they already funded 3 projects in my neighborhood and they're not doing anymore, you know what I mean, until the next year. I mean, I'm just hoping that type of thing will be considered.
Well, and then I do want to just make sure I heighten that, Kim, this is just a start, right? And so I think what we're approving is a start, a pilot, but we'll be continuously growing together, through this process. So it's just the beginning, and we very may on any of our initiatives, we may want to do some revision. We'll know once we open applications and start seeing things come in, where the appropriate pivots are. So it's not a end all be all, and it's not set in stone per se. I think we all should think of these as working and fluid things that we are working together on. Is there any other comments?
I concur with Kim. So I hear you saying it's not an absolute, but I sense that some things are, the last end is not advantageous for a lot of us.
Are there any other strong thoughts? And thank you, Rev. Noted.
And Kirk, I think perhaps what we can do in October, we can just go back to the URA and say, we talked about it and we realized that there's a couple of these categories or this category in particular, we want to be accepted from the last in funding. I mean, it's our choice to guide it, right? And they have to approve. It shouldn't be a hard task to accomplish.
I think it would be as simple as just adding soft costs as a potential use. Okay.
Yeah, we can talk about it. We'll talk about it at the committee meeting.
Okay. Okay, so these scoring metrics again are to evaluate applications, to make sure that these, and I would love for these to be publicly communicated and people to really understand how their applications will be scored. And it's what I would use as of now to make recommendations for funding to the community advisory board. Again, I just want to leave space. I think there's only one other slide here before we kind of get to our time. But if there's any comments or questions about the scoring metrics and how they could be used or the process, feel free to jump in. The outreach plan, I'll just go over really quickly, again, so we could leave some time for open discussion. This is all with the thought that we get our guidelines approved in October. We can go to the next slide really quickly, Alex. And so we would need to have applications ready to be released on October 10th. For that to happen, they actually have to be ready to go well before that. So with the approval we just received a few minutes ago for applications and the related software, I will make sure that the applications are ready to go. We're going to need to host, I will need to host, we will need to advertise to the community virtual and in-person info sessions that would begin right away the following week. Just kind of looking at best practices for the Housing Stabilization Fund. I know the URA team members and some of the advisory board members were instrumental in getting the word out. We're able to, canvass the community and get information out. We're able to hold appointments and sessions so as many people that were interested could begin to apply, and that's a best practice we definitely want to employ. The creation of a one-pager detailing programs, a QR code to virtually access applications. This is something I kind of been playing with. Each of our guidelines that we approved and formally introduced to the board does have a paragraph about what the funds are intended to support. We could put that on a flyer. So there's multiple ways that we can get this information out into the community. People would be able to access a QR code and access the applications directly. Again, just another way of trying to eliminate some barriers. Co-chairs and board members, I did float maybe a month or two ago the idea of having a community meeting, which obviously is going to be more needed as we get guidelines approved. I think the next URA board meeting and subsequent approval of these guidelines really sets the stage for having a community-wide meeting. And Councilman, it would be great to think about, is that possible to happen shortly after the guidelines are approved? And I know we're already halfway through September. We would want to give us ample time to plan and advertise, but it seems like there might be a really good time to have that at the end of October, no later than earlier November. Just something to think about. This isn't at all the exhaustive menu of what needs to occur, but these were just some key benchmarks that I wanted to present. With that, I think we are not ready to adjourn. I think there's still some discussion here. So I wanted to open the floor for any comments related to anything that was discussed today for the board members. So.
Yeah, this is Lakeisha. Thanks, Kirk, for laying out so the pathway for us to get to the goal of releasing the funds before the end of the year. And I apologize if I missed this point, if you made it, but I know we had discussed, you kind of had a proposal or a plan around once the applications are out and we receive those applications, kind of having panels of people put together who might have, experience in different areas to help to use those rubrics to kind of score each application, so we can kind of parse through and get to who those funds are going to get out to. Is that the process that's going to happen when the applications come in? Is that something that we need to vote on, or is that kind of where are we at with that process in terms of who's actually going to be looking at those apps and looking at the metrics and the requirements, checking those boxes and all of that, and then I guess you would be the person doing follow-up, obviously, if there's missing information or we needed more information. But what ways do the advisory board members or whoever else come into play in terms of looking at the applications?
Thank you, Keisha. And so, and I want to open the floor for other thoughts on this from the advisory board members. But Keisha, I definitely remember clearly talking to you about this and a couple of other advisory board members about what is the appropriate process or plan to score applications. I think some thoughts have been so it's not on one person's shoulders. I think people I've talked to, some thoughts have been so that there's trust, across the community, that there, isn't one organization or one entity or what have you, kind of making ultimately those decisions on the applications. And so I think there's been multiple ideas that have been floated since we initially talked. Lakeisha, there hasn't been a decision made. Right now, the way it is written is based off of my job description. And Alex, if you want to speak to that, you can, which is the applications will be scored by the project manager. The project manager makes recommendations to the advisory board, and the advisory board ultimately votes and decides, who receives funding. But that does put the decision, the scoring, and the subsequent recommendations squarely on the shoulders of the project manager. We may want to explore, is there some type of panel that can do that? To your point, Lakeisha, does this panel have some separation from directly being involved or direct knowledge of the various organizations that may apply? I'm open to what this advisory board feels. But Alex, from your perspective, from a legal URA perspective, could you just speak to some of that language? But again, I want to be clear, I'm open to what the advisory board feels is best. And I do think it's customary to have maybe a panel and not just one person. But Alex, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and I mean, Kirk, I think you accurately summarized it. The way we sort of drafted the RFP for your position and have your contract set up is that, you would be kind of reviewing these proposals, scoring them, presenting that to the board would issue a recommendation to the URA board, and that's how the process would be. But that's not a requirement. Like with I can speak to kind of what the URA does as a practice, where if we have project teams reviewing proposals, there will be multiple people from different departments setting up a committee, scoring them. So we can do that here amongst members of the advisory board. But really, it's all up to you about how you all want to score these.
Can I comment? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just suggest at least a panel of 3 with Kirk, you, and 2 others at least, that you're not all that load is not on you, and it can get kind of crazy if someone says Kirk made all the decisions, even though it comes back to the total board. And it doesn't have to be all of the board members, but at least at minimum 3 people who then assess all the applications, send them and make assess them, and then bring it back to the board for the committee for final approval. That's just my own suggestion. I wouldn't do that solo, especially just in the season that we're in. I wouldn't do that solo personally.
I hear you, Rev. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm fine with having a panel. I believe it needs to be very small. I don't believe it should be a large panel.
And that's why I said 3, honestly.
Okay.
I agree. I think that we will likely need to, just looking at the time and knowing we have a hard stop at 4, likely need to move this to a separate discussion. Kirk, if you want to include, the housing discussion, MBE, and this in one meeting, I think that would be really smart if we want to stick to this timeline because it's getting close. But yeah, I think that would be the best way forward. And then I also wanted to comment, I saw a bullet on one of the slides that said and something about an application fee.
Yes, Alex, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So, and there was some discussion amongst URA leadership about including possible fees associated with these projects, whether it's like an underwriting fee, like an origination fee, or even just like an application fee. There was a placeholder on the publicly posted guidelines for a fee section. So we kind of wanted to call the board's attention to that. There haven't been any decisions amongst like Tom or Sushila about, what exactly fees they would be wanting to charge. But we thought we would get the board's opinions on any additional fees associated with these grants. For instance, when the URA is passing through through an RCAP grant, we'll take a 3% fee from the total value to cover administrative costs.
I think that I don't think that there should be an application fee, first of all. I don't think we need any barriers for a community where the income is still below $25,000 a year, unfortunately, average income. And so I absolutely do not think there should be any application fee. In terms of other fees, the URA is already collecting an administrative fee. They are already being compensated for their time. There does not need to be an additional fee on top of that. And I think that's an important component, right, to discuss. And this is why the comment earlier around having a work plan or an anticipated amount of time spent on the work is important, because how much time will that take for the URA to, review an application? I presume you're just talking about the development initiatives, applications. How much time will that be? Because we don't want, of course, the fund to then end up paying another $25,000 in expenses because so many people have had to touch it internally. So I think those are things we definitely need to talk about, but we can't do that, Alex, without getting the information from the URA on what you all expect the time to be in review. But I don't think that the recipient should be responsible for paying fees at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Marimba. Anyone else want to voice their support or opposition?
Ditto.
I agree with Marimba's thinking.
Yeah, ditto.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah, I
flagging.
totally agree.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you for flagging that, Marimba. That was inadvertently skipped over. We needed to have this discussion. I definitely agreed with the committee here, and I think it was just important for everyone to hear the thoughts there. So I think it's pretty unanimous there, Alex, that there's not support for an application fee. We don't want to impose any additional barriers.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll report that back to leadership. Like I said, there hasn't been a official recommendation about what even if we are charging fees, what those fees would be or what they'd be for. So thank you for everyone for their input.
Cool. All right, so I think, guys, that we covered everything we needed to today. If you guys are ready to conclude the meeting. Marimba?
Move for adjourn.
All right. We will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, take care, everybody.